Welcome back to The Formula, ladies and gentlemen. I'm your friendly neighborhood host, Trevor Carlson, and on The Formula, we share with you my experiences, experiments, and conversations about designing a fulfilling life, whatever that means, whatever form that takes for you. On this episode, I am joined by author Kate Swoboda. She is the author of the recent book, The Courage Habit. We have a nice back and forth about the core concepts of her new book, and it's been praised by the likes of Daniel Pink, who's an author you may have heard of. Now, the book shows you how to really accept your fears, release your past, and live your courageous life. I owe Kate a big apology. I am human, and I made a couple mistakes in the episode. I called the book The Courageous Habit a few times. I really apologize, Kate. We had a great conversation, and I hope that my mistakes don't take away from the message in the episode. Now, before I ramble on any further or butcher any other words or names, let's hear a quick word from our sponsors and get this show started. All right. Let's give a quick shout out to our first sponsor of this week's episode, Lady Boss. Lady Boss is a women's health company that provides workout plans, supplements, all kinds of stuff to help women really live more healthy, at least physically better lives. And it was founded by Kaylin Poulin. Hopefully she'll be a guest of the show here sometime soon. Head on over to theformulapodcast.com and click on the sponsored products page if Lady Boss products sound like something that would be interesting for you. Our next sponsor is Liquid Web. Now, if you're looking to launch some type of e-commerce store, drop shipping, whatever it is, maybe you've listened to the episodes with Adrian, Ketsu, or all three of us. We're talking about our different e-commerce ventures that we've gotten into. Liquid Web has these pre-made solutions just for you guys. So they were also nice enough to hook up Formula Podcast listeners with 33% off all their products. So if you type in Formula 33 on the checkout page, you're going to get 33% off whatever you decide to pick up over at liquidweb.com. Now, let's get on to the show. Kate, thanks for taking the time to stop by and chat with me today. I really appreciate it. I was kind of going through your stuff, and you just published a book, The Courageous Habit. Is that correct?
The Courage Habit.
Courage Habit.
Yeah.
Close. I'm assuming you didn't just wake up one day and just become this person you are today and have this book published. That seems to be doing really well. Can you kind of walk me through your origin story, where you came from, how you got to be where you are today?
Well, I love being someone who can dispel the myth of the self-help guru. I'm definitely not. I'm a human being like everybody else. And my current trajectory, I think, really came from a day where I had just done all the things that you're supposed to do. I had ticked off all the boxes, dotted all the I's, crossed all the T's. I had gone to college, gotten the good grades, joined the committees, plumped up my CV, done all the extra stuff. So it was a shock to me to be sitting in a meeting one day at work and suddenly feel as if I was, having a break or a panic attack or something, because it was the clearest thing in the world to me, the voiceless voice. I'm not trying to be really woo here, but this inner knowing of I don't want to do this anymore. And there was this other voice that was kind of like, what? Since when? Because, you have very consciously orchestrated all of this. My life was not like a bad marriage that I just kind of got swept up into in the heat of the moment or something. I had planned, I had worked, I'd been a type A overachiever to get exactly there. So the realization that I was not happy really shocked me, and more than anything, it scared me, because if I had been so conscious about making all the moves to get myself there, and then I still was not happy, how would I trust myself around a pivot? How would I figure out what to do next? So I really stewed in a lot of fear, and especially at that time, the perfectionism wanted to uphold an image and not be fearful, wanted to have a quick action plan. That wasn't happening. And there was this point where I just had to surrender to the fact that I was, I don't know if I can curse here, but bleeping afraid.
No, you can. It's fine.
I was just afraid. I was just fucking afraid. And there was no getting around that. There was no nice way to make it look. There was no falling from a pedestal and now I'm reimagining my life. It was actually just, I have no idea what the fuck I'm doing. And all my best choices got me right here. And right here feels like a real mess. And in hindsight, I began doing kind of a postmortem on the choices I'd made. And I could see the signs were actually everywhere all along that I was not happy, that the choices hadn't been getting me where I really had wanted to go. So no wonder they added up to what they did. But it was a very difficult time, and I can't underscore that enough. And now I like underscoring it a lot rather than trying to hide it, because I know there's going to be someone who's listening who's going to go, oh my God, that's my story too. I did all the right things. I did everything I was supposed to. I did everything I thought was going to get me to this place where I would get the thing I wanted or have the life I wanted. And suddenly I don't have that life. I'm not happy.
Yeah, I think that unfortunately, that's a reality that a lot of people have woken up to. I mean, even myself, I can think of all the boxes I checked over the years where I was like, I want to be an entrepreneur. I want to do all these things. And then I remember I actually accomplished a lot of them. I was like the unhappiest I'd ever been, which had kind of led to we discussed this earlier, my living out of a bag for the better part of the last year. Unfortunately, it's a more common thing than I would like to hear. I'm sure you would like to hear as well. So you kind of had this realization, you realized you had, followed, I guess, society's rule book or guidebook for how to be successful or how to lead a successful life. And now you're like, holy shit, I'm not where I want to be. I'm not happy with my current position. So where did you go from there?
Well, I went into what I think of as initially the self-help hamster wheel, which is where you're spinning furiously with all the self-help tools, trying to, again, still make it look really nice and neat. You're still, I'm going to sit down, I'm going to make a list of my values, and I'm going to make aligned choices. I'm going to have a success mindset. And there's no problem with any of those things if they work for someone, right? Like, I think in self-help, there's almost this kind of like weird, very unself-help like competition over who has the right tool and who has the right formula. And I think it's all bullshit, and really we're all just unique individuals, and some things that work for some people don't work for others. But in my case, I was picking all the things that really looked nice, almost like trying to craft the new narrative. Like what I did is I sat down and none of it worked. None of it worked. And I think things just kind of fell apart. It was like once I saw I couldn't unsee, and I tried all the things to unsee, but I couldn't unsee. It wasn't working, and there was no easy answer for what to pivot to next. And I think the thing that was most transformative at the time was really deciding that I was going to be authentic about the fact that it just wasn't fucking working, and I was afraid that I didn't have an answer. I mean, the paradox was that as soon as I stopped resisting being so afraid, and I actually felt the fear, like literally felt it in my body, began talking to people about the fear, began dialoguing with the fear and kind of going, okay, fear, you and me, you're like in my head all day long telling me that I'm completely lame because I can't figure my life out. Get out a piece of paper. Tell me everything. I'm going to write down everything you have to say, all the critical thoughts, and then I'm going to question them. And instead of trying to avoid the fear or ignore the fear, instead of attacking it, telling it, I'm going to kick your ass, go away, and instead of placating it, which I think is a lot of what happens on that route of trying to choose all the things that are socially approved, you're just placating your fear. You're hoping if you do everything right, fear won't kick up and tell you that you're a mess. And once I stopped doing those things, the fear was distinctly uncomfortable, but somehow it was also more bearable. And that was when I started to look around and go like, wow, I have a graduate degree in a totally different discipline, and here I am sitting here and I want to become a life coach. Which is all these parents out there, they're going MBAs, lawyers, they're not going life coaches. And my parents were pretty supportive over the course of things. But, it's this path that just is really not a bunch of people saying this is like the high status, high wealth, starting over in a lot of ways, being an entrepreneur, uncertain income. But that was what I wanted to follow. And as I began working with people over time, I started to really find that what I was most fascinated by was looking at people's fear patterns. And that's when I began to see how the fear patterns emerge. There are little individual differences, but they're predominant fear patterns that emerge. And then that's when I began to realize that fear-based behaviors are actually brain-based habits. We habitually respond to fear that we feel in these fear-based patterned ways that are in part governed by the brain. By the point when it becomes an identity, when somebody's raising their hand saying, I'm a classic perfectionist, or I'm a classic people pleaser, we stop remembering that it's actually a brain-based habit, and you can break a habit and create a new habit. So then I got all geeky into behavioral science and habit formation, and then, book deal, and I'm so excited to tell everyone about it. Like, no, you actually don't have to be at the mercy of your old habits forever. You can practice something new until it becomes your new identity, until it becomes, I am a courageous person. How do I approach this situation with courage?
I'm trying to think through when you're in that situation, when you're facing this fear or that moment where you've realized that the life that you're building towards isn't actually the one that you want. What advice really do you have to someone who's in that space right now where, their fear is telling them that they have to behave in this manner, or, they're presented with a situation that, they've realized that they've achieved this goal, but it's really not actually where they wanted to be?
Well, there are different component parts, and you can pick any one that you want, I think. And they're all kind of get you into that space of curiosity and being with your fear. One component part is you can look at how you've habitually dealt with fear or not liking the situation you're in the past. And you can go, oh, have I been avoiding, pleasing, or attacking this situation that I don't like being in? And what are my alternatives? Another one is you could get clear about your fear patterns so that you can get really clear about when they're kicking up. And I think that's a helpful part of the process. Perfectionism, people-pleasing, pessimism, self-sabotage. So far, have not found any behaviors that don't fit into one of those categories. Perfectionism, people-pleasing, pessimism, self-sabotage. If you want, in a moment, I can break down what some of those look like. And then the other thing that you can do is you can start practicing what I call the courage habit, which I certainly did not invent, but I basically did a review of research to go, how do people develop emotional resilience in the face of fear? How do people walk into challenging situations instead of avoid them and emerge able to go, okay, this is hard, but I'm okay. And the 4 behaviors that emerged were accessing the body, listening without attachment to the fear, reframing what the fear is saying, the limiting story, and reaching out and creating community. So again, you can look at how you've habitually tried to avoid, please, or attack fear. You can look at what your fear pattern is, or you can go, you know what, I need to use a tool that is going to build emotional resilience. And that's where we get into accessing the body, listening without attachment, reframing a limiting story, and reaching out and creating community.
Now, when you say accessing the body, can you explain more on that? I feel like I have a general idea of what you mean, but I want to make sure.
Well, usually people refer to meditation and mindfulness practices, and those absolutely can be very helpful. I've also found that it's helpful to cry, there's this world that we live in right now where terrible, horrible, awful things happen to people all the time. And what we tend to do with emotion, and on top of the things we're hearing about, right? We have our own stress. We're trying to pay bills. We go through breakups. People that we love aren't kind, all kinds of stuff like that. So on top of all that, what we tend to do is we tend to sort of stuff those emotions away. I think of it as like an emotional balloon, which is a metaphor that I got from the Challenge Day organization. So, we take these emotions, we stuff them into a balloon. What happens to a balloon when it gets too full of air? It either leaks or it explodes. Leaking, emotional leaking, looks like people being low-grade, gritchety, irritated, resentful, pissy, and exploding, of course, looks like people just totally losing it. So what do we need to do? We need to discharge some of that emotion from that emotional balloon. So literally when I'm stressed out and I can see that it's all gotten to be too much, in the same way that someone sits down on a zafu perhaps to meditate for 20 minutes, I sit down on a zafu for 20 minutes to consciously cry. It's not just like mopey, wallowy cry. It's like I'm sitting down right now and I can tell because I'm sniping at my husband. I am gritting my teeth at that email. I am, just anxious. I need to discharge some emotion. So I'll sit down and I'll just cry it out. Always feel better. Throwing around some barbells at CrossFit, hugely beneficial. I mean, slamming a medicine ball on the floor over and over. Really great for venting stress, for releasing stress. So you can do all kinds of things. Sex and self-pleasure, as long as it's done with the idea that I'm intentionally doing this rather than by rote. Taking walks, stretching, whatever gets you into your body. And a body scan, just to kind of close your eyes, check, where am I holding tension, tightness, all of those things. Because fear is not logical. It's primal. We don't logically go, oh yes, I'm sitting here right now with my Chardonnay and I'm afraid. I see. Yes, it's all fine. We're feeling it in our bodies. We live in a culture that really prioritizes the cool-headed person who never gets upset. I would argue that the cool-headed person who never gets upset, unless they're doing something to vent that emotion, they're not actually so cool-headed. They're stuffing things away, and it's going to catch up with them. And I would say, too, that people who totally lose it, they lose it because they're stuffing their emotions. They're not taking time to process them out.
So your recommendation, the first step would be access the body in whatever form that is: meditation, CrossFit, slamming medicine balls. And you went through a list of others that I thought were really good. What was the second one you said?
Listening without attachment. That fear, it's like when I talked about being in my own mess and just going, fine, fear. What do you want to say? Tell me everything. I'm not going to avoid you. I'm not going to placate you, and I'm not going to attack you. I'm just going to listen. And I just started writing it all down. And that is a way of getting the thoughts out of your head and being able to have some kind of a process with them. Sometimes when I've described this, people are like, oh, like Byron Katie, the work. Is it really true? It's like, yeah, that's a form of reframing, but actually I'm pulling from research in, say, dialectical behavior therapy or narrative therapy that actually invites people, acceptance and commitment therapy, that invites people to, instead of running from the voices in your head that we all have, what are they actually trying to say? And are they helpful or not? Is there some kind of information we might be trying to push ourselves away from? And how do we listen to that voice and process it and put a boundary around it, instead of being run by it? I'm not saying if the voice in your head is telling you that you're a worthless piece of shit, that you should be like, that's right, voice in my head. I got it. I'm listening. No, it's just okay, so worthless piece of shit. Okay, got it. I got a critic that thinks I'm a worthless piece of shit. Let's see here. I'm listening. I don't accept that, but I'm listening. It's a boundaried kind of listening. Another example I'll sometimes give is if you were walking down the street and you saw somebody who was clearly very drunk and they walk up to you and they're slurring their words and they're like, hey, you've got blue hair. Are you gonna start freaking out thinking that you have blue hair? No. Because the person's drunk and you don't have blue hair. It's the same thing. You can hear the words without making them mean something about who you are or what you're capable of.
Yeah, have you heard of I don't know if there's an actual name for it. I just call it the 5 whys.
Yes.
It's kind of like what you're saying, where maybe you identify some fear that's coming up and then you just kind of ask yourself okay, why? Where is that coming from? And then you work your way down until you get to a point where either you don't have any more whys left, you can't really go any further, or you have a very concrete answer. Is that something that you encourage people to do as well?
Absolutely. It's another approach. I read about that in Dave Asprey's book, Game Changers. He's the founder of Bulletproof Coffee.
Oh, yeah.
Game Changers is an amalgamation of different interviews that he's done and the best advice. And somebody in one of those interviews, I think, told him about the 5 whys. So yeah, perfect example. You're just listening. You're not trying to tell that voice inside that it's wrong. You're just going, well, why? What's happening here?
And like you said, you have to do it without judging yourself. Otherwise, I can use an example for myself. There's certain things in my business that I don't like to do and they stress me out. And I'll just be I'll just dread doing them. And I'll be all right. And I'll start stressing, knowing that I have to do taxes. I don't think anybody enjoys taxes. So sitting down and saying, okay, well, why are you so worried about this? It's well, you never know what might happen.
Right.
Could get audited. And it's okay, are you being dishonest? Well, no. Okay, then why are you worried about this? Well, this could happen. Then you realize it's just an unrealistic fear, because I have some other fear that's tied to money. If I get audited and I have to pay extra into taxes, and maybe I can't hire this next person. If I can't hire this next person, maybe I can't go on my vacation, and then it just spirals into an actual root of the problem, where your fear is actually coming from.
Completely. It's what is at the root of this? And I love that you talk about it being about a fear, because I think there's even this place with that example of when you say, what if I got audited? I think, well, the worst would actually be if you were totally honest and you still freaking got audited. That would, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I take the approach that fear is not bad or wrong. It's a wound. And it's a wound that has learned really dysfunctional ways of communicating about what it needs or what's wrong. So it does things like tell you that you're a piece of crap to stop you from taking a risk where you might be rejected or where you might fail. That's an incredibly dysfunctional way of approaching life from a logic-based perspective, but from a fear, feeling in your body perspective, it makes a lot of sense. And whenever people tell me, well, I can't even get to the point where I'm listening without attachment because the fear is so strong, I'm yeah, you need to go access the body. You need to go for a run. You need to go scream into a pillow. You need to punch a pillow. You need to cry. You need to get some emotion out, because that's what's going to get you to some clearer thinking where you can listen more objectively.
I was having a conversation. Actually, it was another interview that I did. I brought in a previous guest and we were talking about romantic relationships, dating and whatnot. And I brought up this situation where I was yeah, I should have said this thing, but then I got, uncomfortable or afraid or something. And then I said the complete opposite because of one reason or another. And I was beating myself up over it. And I was yeah, I understand that there's some fear or whatever associated with it. But then what do you do once you've recognized that fear is there? It's really difficult just to be okay, I understand I'm afraid. Now I'm just going to not be afraid anymore. You're saying the next logical step is then to go back to step one and access the body, get the emotions out, and what do you do from there?
I mean, we're talking about them as steps, and that can be helpful, but I actually think of it as like a whole process. Like you could start with, kind of the last of the 4 that I mentioned was reaching out and creating community. And so like reaching out when you're in it is another option if you're stressed about your taxes or dating or any of those things too. But listening without attachment, most people don't just want to listen. They're kind of like, okay, I've listened enough. What do I do with what fear is telling me? And that's when I usually am like, well, okay, so reframe limiting stories, which is not reciting glitzy affirmations, law of attraction style. I mean, again, unless that works for you, if that makes you feel really uplifted and happy and solid and grounded and all that, great. But most of the people that I have ever talked with about positive affirmations, and I would say I am one of these people too, is I feel like I'm lying to myself. I feel like I'm going, I don't have any problems whatsoever. Life is so, and it just feels so like fake. So reframing limiting stories, again, this draws from research in dialectical behavior therapy, narrative therapy, acceptance and commitment therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy. It's not about going to the broadest vision possible. It's about like a little lily pad, and one lily pad at a time gets you across the pond. At the time when I was feeling really afraid about this career pivot that I was making, my fear would have me say, you're going to completely fail and then you're not going to have any money. What a loser that you put all this work into this and then it didn't work out. It's like, hold on. Okay, I'm listening to what you say. Reframe limiting story. I got to reframe this. Okay, you're going to fail. Well, yeah, I might. And I'm going to be okay. It is going to be hard, but I'm going to be okay. So we're not talking reframing as you're going to fail to, you're a winner. You're always a winner, no matter, it's like, no, and you're going to be okay. And it's not going to feel okay for a while. Like it's very pragmatic. So reframing limiting stories, I think, is something that can be really helpful, especially if you are not trying to talk yourself out of feeling how you feel. When you're doing that work, anytime you get stuck and you're like, this just isn't working, I feel like I'm lying to myself, it's like process out some emotion, because that's, to me, the sticking spot where people get stuck. You can't go too logical with all that fear moving around in the body.
So you've identified your limiting belief or limiting self-talk, and there was one other step. So
reaching out and creating community.
Oh, yeah, that was one. I was going to say, we covered that already?
Well, they're all kind of a hodgepodge. Like I said, you can kind of start anywhere, and they can be an entry point into rerouting how we habitually experience our fear.
So when you say that to reach out or create community, that means when you're in that state, maybe having like a friend you can call or a group of people that you can reach out to, something. Am I on the right path there?
Totally. And I would say, too, podcasts, like somebody listening to this podcast right now is doing something very good for themselves, because they're listening to, even if they're not in the room with either of us, they're listening to you, they're listening to me, and they're connecting to the humanity of what it's like to confront these questions, to not know what you're doing in your life at all times, and to go, hey, I'm fumbling too. Here are some tools that are helpful.
Yeah.
It's about knowing that you're not alone. Of course, reaching out and creating community is often the hardest and most vulnerable step. It requires a lot of courage. You're not going to ever be fearless, but you can definitely fear less when you are walking into some of these tools. And especially, fear thrives in isolation. It goes crazy in isolation, and it diminishes in community. It diminishes when you've got other people going, you know what, you're actually pretty normal. You're having a hard time right now. Guess what? You're not alone. Everybody has a hard time with this.
Yeah, and I think that's a really empowering thing, just from my own personal experience, knowing when I was younger and going through, I call them learning experiences, and being like, why can't I seem to get any of this right? Why does no one else seem to be having any problems? Everyone seems to just be doing exceptionally well. And then finding out that actually
they're not.
Yeah, everything I was going through was just like, everyone's going through the same stuff. They're just, we just kind of deal with it. And I'm like, oh, okay, so everyone's doing this. So now I actually don't feel so bad, because I know I'm not the only one. And if other people can figure it out, there's a good chance that I can figure it out myself or talk with them and get some advice and work through it.
It's one of the reasons why people don't just endlessly sign up for newsletters to help with their problems. I mean, that's one form of getting help, but like the time spent with you on the phone is going to be of immense value to a client, because they're not doing it alone. They're getting another set of eyes on a challenge. They've got somebody else to normalize things for them and say, hey, like, this is a normal problem that people run into, and it's fine.
Let's talk a bit about your book, unless there's more you have to cover with those 4 steps.
I am happy to talk about the book.
All right. So I already butchered the name once, but it's Courageous Habit, right?
It's the courage habit.
Damn it. I thought I did it the opposite way the first time. All right.
Well, hey, it's two different ways of forming an adjective, right?
I don't know why I keep doing that. It's the courage habit. What is the courage habit? Talk to me about that.
Well, I look at the courage habit as being about understanding the way the brain forms a habit and substituting fear-based habits for the courage-based habits. So access the body, listen without attachment, reframe limiting stories, reach out, create community. That is the courage habit. But most importantly, what's the science behind it? So in your brain, when you feel a cue, your brain then looks for a routine to turn to. The routine is designed to bring a reward. Now, the brain determines what a reward is. It's something of a misnomer because the brain determines what a reward is as whatever will reduce stress the fastest. So if someone has a really bad day and they feel the cue of fear, and then the brain goes, hey, I know what worked last time. Let's drink like 5 bottles of wine. That brought us the reward of less stress. Do it. That is going to be the thing that the brain will want to turn to the next time and the next time. And then, of course, you start getting opiate receptors and, biochemistry involved and stuff like that. Reward is something of a misnomer in that might not be in the person's best interest long term. I've had people ask me, well, I keep getting into the same argument with my partner, and I want to use positive language and be solution focused, and then I end up getting mad and I get these pot shots in, and that's like a habit. But how's that a reward? It's like, well, the reward is probably something like you feel a cue of stress and fear in the argument, you get the pot shots in, and then your reward, air quotes, is you feel more in control, or you discharge a little bit of that stress that we've been talking about, that emotional balloon. What we do is we've got 4 predominant fear patterns: perfectionism, people pleasing, self-sabotage, and pessimism. And we all do all of them, but usually one of them we do more than the others. So when I feel fear, I'll raise my hand and tell you, my default is perfectionism. I'm like, I can outwork anybody, baby. Like, how can I sit down, make my list, not have to feel the vulnerability and discomfort because I have sat down and done it all perfectly? And then I get that temporary reward of feeling in control, but of course, it's a short-term reward. The longer-term reward, the thing that I had started to really pay attention to around habits in my own life, is that when I feel that cue of fear, how do I not go into the perfectionism? How do I instead deal with my fear by reaching out and calling a friend, or looking at what my fear is saying, or accessing the body? Because the perfectionism piece, that's only going to get me so far. Same thing with people pleasing, pessimism, self-sabotage. Those are behavioral habits that we have done so often that they're ingrained and we don't even think twice about them. And they bring relief because they're what's known, they're what's familiar, but they don't bring long-term success.
Yeah, I'm thinking of myself and some lessons I've learned. And that's when I was younger, I felt like that whenever I would come up, there would be a business obstacle or something new that would come up. The first thing I would do is call someone to try to get an answer, right? Mm-hmm. And I felt like that almost became a crutch for me, where instead of me just figuring it out or trying to figure it out on my own, I felt like I was calling people and asking them to kind of solve the problem for me. Mm-hmm. Can that actually hold people back a bit when they're feeling the fear, reaching out to others to have them help?
Sure, it all depends on how you use it. It's the example of even the most delicious food in the world. If you eat too much of it, it's going to make you sick. It sounds like a self-sabotage maneuver. In that case, it was using people to get answers from them about what comes next instead of relying on your own wisdom, your own most courageous self, your own intuition. That is absolutely one way that it can be used. Reaching out and creating community is really about the vulnerability of sharing the fear that you're in and what's happening for you. And that's a little bit different than relying on other people to fix or give answers. Mm-hmm. That's the differentiation that I would call on. I like to think of these things as being like, you can turn the volume up too far on even your favorite music and it becomes painful to listen to. Perfectionism is the volume turned up way too far on a really positive thing to do, which is like tenacity, hustle, a willingness to face adversity. But when you turn that volume up too far because it's coming from a fear-based place of, oh my God, I have to do it right, then it becomes this thing that's parasitic and grinds you down. When it's coming from a courage-based place, which is, I really take pride in my work. And this goal is important to me, so I'm really going to look at what I can do to create the results that I want. That's a very positive, resilient place from which to create your life.
Yeah, I agree. I think that the way you laid that out with perfectionism was right on point. And then as you said, the self-sabotage thing, I'm like, damn, that sounds pretty accurate with the calling and asking for answers instead of trusting yourself. We covered perfectionism and self-sabotage. Did you have anything to say about the other two?
People pleasing and pessimism. Yeah, I mean, for people who notice, and again, we all do all of them, it's just usually one of them's a bigger hook than the rest. I'll use the same example that people pleasing is like the volume turned up way too loud on a wonderful trait, which is interdependence and willingness to be part of a team and willingness to give and be generous, willingness to look around and go, what does someone else need? And can I get gratification out of giving rather than only from receiving? That's a very healthy orientation to come from. People pleasing is about fear. It's about if I don't do what this person wants me to do, they won't like me. Or they'll think I'm selfish, or I will feel that I'm too selfish. That's a fear-based orientation. Pessimism is getting into that like womp womp kind of space. Like, well, what's the point? There's so many entrepreneurs out there anyway. Somebody else has already had that idea. Why do I even bother? It's not like I can sit around and do what I want all day. So, it's going to take too long. I'm too old. I'm too young, And pessimism is the volume turned up way too high on a very healthy trait, which is critical thinking. Like, yeah, maybe you need a little critical thinking about, this venture capitalist gig I'm going to buy into. I'm going to quit my job and I'll be a millionaire in a month. Yeah, you need some skeptical thinking about that. So pessimism is the same thing. Pessimism is probably also rooted in a very healthy willingness to look at your current and available resources and not overtax yourself. It's like, these are all very positive things that these behaviors can be rooted in, but pessimism is about fear. It's not about, hold on a second, let me take a realistic inventory of my budget. It's about what's the point of even trying? It's never going to work out, which is really about fear. When it comes from a place of courage and resilience, it's going to show up as healthy striving. It's going to show up as interdependence, or I'm going to take a moment to look at what reasonable for me to accomplish that won't lead to burnout, or I'm going to call this friend and I'm actually going to really let them know where I'm at rather than ask them to fix or give me advice. When it comes from fear, it becomes that perfectionism, people-pleasing, pessimism, and self-sabotage.
Right. And then the 4 steps that we discussed earlier, that's how you move from that fear base to more of a courageous base, correct?
Absolutely. Yeah. Like when you feel that cue of fear, like a takeaway for a listener would be, okay, as you go out into your day today, at some point you're going to feel stress or tension, whatever word you want to put for fear. It's like Elizabeth Gilbert or something who said like stress is the word that perfectionists use for being afraid. Like instead of saying I'm afraid, they'll say, oh, I'm just stressed. So stress, overwhelm, anxiety, worry, fear, whatever you want to call it, the next time you feel that, hold on a second. Instead of going into perfectionism, people-pleasing, pessimism, self-sabotage routines that get you to that short-term reward of familiarity or feeling in control or whatever they might be. It's like you got to interrupt that behavioral habit and go, okay, maybe I need to take a walk right now instead of trying to figure out how to better optimize this Facebook ad. That's usually my response to trying to manage the ads manager in Facebook. Oh my God. Yeah. If they could get an earful from me about that ads manager backend. Listening without attachment. Maybe I just need to sit down and like actually breathe and just go, okay, fear, critic, whatever you want to call that internalized self. What's going on right now? Maybe you need to call a friend and go like, I'm in it right now. I don't need you to fix me. I don't need advice. I'm in it. Talk to me about your cat. Like I need to be seen and I need to like have someone be with me in it. That's all I need.
Yeah, I think I've been that for some other people where they're like, I'm having a bad day. Tell me what you're doing. And I'm like, okay, sitting here in this place, doing something. We have a nice laugh, and then they'll be like, thanks for just talking to me for a minute. I just was stressed or worn out or just upset about something, and I just needed to talk about something else, and I knew that your ridiculous ass would have something funny to say. So I get those calls quite a bit, actually. So maybe I'm that person's support group or something.
Well, clearly they trust you. So, and that speaks to your character.
I think I just try to do the best that I can. And I know I've had to call a few of them when I was having a similar type of day. So I think it's definitely a back and forth.
Great. That's that interdependence.
Yeah. Hopefully a healthy interdependence.
Sounds like it.
Yeah. All right, so you've laid out a lot of tactics for us. What I'm curious about is how we can take a lot of these things and start applying them on a daily basis on kind of a micro level. Maybe start out small and then work our way to having like a larger habitual practice of the courage habit.
Well, most people that I talk to use them on like a case-by-case basis when they notice that they're feeling afraid. I'm a huge fan of a daily practice. I have one that I do on my own. I call it On Fire and On Purpose because I feel like it's a state change, like an affect change that I want to experience in my body. And I think that that's really helpful, particularly around accessing the body. I mean, that's my big do this daily tip is like do something in your body every day, because the biggest way that I think fear can control our lives is in going undetected, in operating on autopilot. So when you do something daily to access the body, this is just me, right? Like some people I'm an introvert. Some people, I'm not shy, but I'm very introverted and I like my alone time. And, some people might really want to go, I'm extroverted, and like the biggest point of entry for me is going to be that contact with other people. For me, it's accessing the body. It's how do I dance to create joy or get out in the sunshine or something to not just have these feelings gummed up inside of me, creating a mental state where I don't see possibility, I don't see what else I could do, I don't think well of myself or others. It just spirals from there. So my own personal practice, I call it a daily practice because I feel like too many people, you talk to them, they're like, well, I don't have time in the morning. It's like, okay, well, fine, daily. And here's my no bullshit kind of confronting with kindness talk about a daily practice and people when they say they don't have time, okay? Would you eat food one day of the week and then go, well, I did it Monday. I ate on Monday. I don't need to eat on Tuesday. And then, no, you wouldn't. It wouldn't make any sense. And then people might go, well, but, you have to eat daily. You don't have to meditate daily. And I'm going, no, actually, you're wrong there. You don't have to meditate, I suppose, but you do actually need some kind of daily practice to feed yourself. And if you don't do that daily, that is like basically saying, I'm hungry and food is sitting right there in front of me, but I'm not going to eat it. Or I've got these tools that can make my life better, but nah, this is not a condemnation of anyone else. This is me expressing the point that I got to with it, where I really just kind of got tired of my own bullshit in my head going, well, I don't have time. Yeah, I do have time, because we're really only talking about, the research indicates like 20 minutes a day of meditation will grow the gray matter in your brain. And the gray matter in your brain, in the area of your brain where this grows, is directly correlated with the part of the brain that processes stress, that processes life's challenges. This is why you get so many people when they talk about meditation and they're like, oh my God, it's like I could just slow down in the middle of stress. It's like, yeah, that's a good thing to do, and we need to be doing it daily. So for me, that's where I'm at with it. And it looks like Insight Timer, which is a free meditation app, a guided meditation on that app. You can pay a small fee annually and you get a couple of other features, but you can start with free. And then I have a playlist of songs that I listen to daily because they help me to change my state. And I pay attention at that time. Is there anything I need to cry about? I mean, the week that we're recording this, the bombings just happened in Sri Lanka. They weigh heavily on my heart. I have a 4-year-old. I look around at the world. I think fear-based thoughts like, what kind of world is she growing up into? And it's scary. And if I don't take time to actually cry for those lives lost and for the stress that I feel, then it will eat at me slowly and in really insidious ways. And I know that, and I don't bullshit myself about that. So I took time to cry. Cried today before we got on the phone. So this is what I think, about having a daily practice. I think you need to know what you need, and you need to integrate it daily. Some people, they're crying way too much, and they're like, no, what I actually need is I need joy. So for those people, you need to dance in your office. You need to do something ridiculous. You need to, wear an adhesive mustache and just look at yourself in the mirror and laugh. And then there are other people, it's like they've got not enough quiet. Their lives are chaotic. And it's like, okay, yeah, you need to just sit and breathe. So it's whatever you need, you feed yourself. It's like vitamins. If you're not getting enough vitamin C, that's the one you focus on to get your daily requirement of that. And if you're not getting enough protein, that's what you focus on to get your daily requirement of that. So it doesn't have to look like you sit on a zafu, stare at a wall, watch your in-breath, out-breath, strict Zen Buddhist meditation, or else you're doing it wrong. You can design a daily practice to feed you in the way that you need to be fed.
I think that's a great way to put it. I've tried different types of meditation myself, and for me, either doing the sitting and just breathing, or I love walking in nature.
Yes.
Sometimes I don't have access to it, so sitting is not that bad, but walking in nature, just with no phone, no headphones, no company, just me. At least that for me, that's my go-to way to just meditate and take a second to breathe. Man, we covered a lot of really good stuff so far. Is there anything else that you'd like to leave the audience with today?
What comes up for me as a final thought is all this stuff that we're talking about, this habit change. Like, you need to know, if you are listening to this and you're like, I want to try that. I want to try actually rerouting some of my fear-based patterns and practicing courage. Like, you're going to fail. And as soon as you do, fear is going to be like, look at you, loser. And that's when you access the body. That's when it's like you just have to double down on these tools, because at the beginning, it will feel like too much. It will feel like, God, I have to monitor like every thought. This isn't going anywhere. I just found myself back in people pleasing, saying yes to things again when I told myself I'd say no, and then you beat up on yourself, and then the whole pattern's like back. And that's when you breathe. And it's like, there's got to be something in you that if you want to change these things and not be run by your fear, stuck in your fear, controlled by your fear at all times, you're still going to feel your fear, but the controlled by it is what's hard. There's got to be something in you listening to this that goes, it's going to be hard for a while, but these are just habits. And if you've ever changed any habit in your life before, ever, like if you've changed how you brush your teeth, if you've changed when you eat your breakfast, if you've changed what you eat for breakfast, you've already done this work. It's just that it's harder to do at the beginning, and most of us have been practicing these habits for decades. So there's a lot of gentleness with yourself and a lot of deciding that you are the one who is sovereign over your life and in charge of your life. So it's up to you to decide, this is what I'm going to do differently. I'm not going to be run by this anymore. And I guess the other thing I'll say too is believe in the power of 5 minutes. This is not a life overhaul. This is not like guruism. Follow my plan, the 6 steps of the 5 parts of the 4 things of the 3 philosophies that you can get for 2 easy installments. It's not that. This is a process and this is your life, and you are totally empowered to make it better, and 5 minutes makes a difference.
Absolutely. And if anybody wants to get a hold of your book, they'd head over to yourcourageouslife.com, correct?
Yeah, or Amazon, or booksellers everywhere. I actually have been getting more and more news about foreign rights for the books have sold through my publisher, and it's come out in Korean and Spanish, and I told them, hey, if it comes out in Italy, can I please go do a book tour over there / a little gelato tasting,
That's the perks of becoming an international bookseller, international book tours and gelato.
Yeah, there you go.
Cool. Well, it was really fun talking with you. I'm glad you took the time to stop by and chat with me. I mean, I learned a lot just from talking with you and kind of thinking through some of my own fears and how I can apply some of the steps that you laid out to overcoming or working through some of them. So I really appreciate it, and hopefully some of our listeners have a few takeaways as well, or maybe a few of them pick up your book too.
Great. Thanks for having me.
Well, folks, that's a wrap for this week's show. Thanks again for taking the time to tune in, and thank you to Kate for stopping by and having a nice conversation with me about her book, The Courage Habit. Now, if you enjoyed our conversation or the concepts from the book sounded like something that you might be interested in checking out or reading about, check out the show notes for a link to Kate's book over on Amazon. Pick one up, check it out, and let us know what you think. Now, if I can get you to do one more quick favor, I know you already know what I'm going to ask for. Reviews for the Formula Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, whatever app that you're using. Any more reviews would be really, really helpful. I think next week I'm going to start reading some of the reviews in the outros. So that way, if there's any good ones, we've gotten some funny ones in the past, you guys can all have a nice laugh with us. So definitely appreciate all of you taking the time to tune in, and I look forward to checking out our next episode next week.